After your battery's charged, you're ready to fire up the camera. You're going to put it on. First thing you're going to see is the setting of the date and time. So we're going to go ahead and set it. It's December now. And to do this, you're going to hit the set button, which is in the middle of this four-way controller. And then you're going to scroll up and down, in this case to December. And it's December 9th. I'm going to hit the set button again, 2011, and so we don't have to change that. And then we're going to go over to the time, and this will help you later on establish when and where pictures were taken. Well, not necessarily where, but what date and time. So it's 2:32 in the afternoon, and we're going to set it to 2 and hit set, 32 and 0 seconds. And as soon as you hit OK, it's going to go ahead and start that clock for 2:32. So we're going to go down here to OK, and we're going to hit set, and you're all set. Let's take a look at the back of the camera. There's so many buttons and knobs, but we're going to take you through step by step. We're going to start on the top left part with the menu. So we're going to hit this menu button here, and this brings up the different menus. Now, how do you get to those menus? Use the four-way controller using the left and right to get to the main part of the menu. So we'll go to master menu number 4, for example. And then to get down to any of these things within these menus, you're going to hit the set button. And don't feel like this is so overwhelming because we're going to go through all these different menu settings. And then I'm going to hit it again, and that's how you can get to these different menus. If you want to see info on the screen, you want to go to the info screen, which is the next one. So I'm going to turn the menu off, and I'm going to show you that as I hit this button, you're going to get different info screens. 1, 2, and then if you want a third one, you can go into live view mode. Now, live view mode is next, so we're going to bounce over to this button here, live view mode, and I can go ahead and hit this, and this will allow me to see the image through the viewfinder here, which is nice because it's a fully articulating screen, and that means you don't have to have your eye up to eyepiece. And again, if I hit the info button there, it displays different information and displays it right on the back of the screen. So far you've learned about the menu button, calling up your menus, the info button for your information screens, and then you've learned about the live view mode, which will also be used when you're doing filming of movies, which you'll learn later. One thing I skipped over was this beautiful eyepiece here. You have your diopter adjustment, which is a little plus or minus to the right top of the eyepiece. So you're going to turn this little knob to adjust for your eyes so you don't have to use glasses looking through this. And the best way to do it is zoom in on an object using, say, this live mode, then zoom back. You know it's in focus. And once it's in focus, stick your eye in here. And while your eye's in there, turn this little dial to make sure it evens out to 20/20 vision. So you've learned about the menu and the info, the eyepiece, the diopter, the live view mode. The next thing is this AV plus or minus. Now what this gives you is this gives you a little exposure compensation. And you see the -3 to +3. If I hit that, it highlights it. Now there's other ways to get to this, but this is the easiest and quickest when you're at a job. And then you're going to turn the top dial here to the left or the right, which will allow you to get a plus or minus 1, 2, or 3 compensation. If something's perpetually too dark or perpetually too bright, this is a nice way to help fix it. Right below that, you're going to see something called a Q mode. Q button, we'll call it. And then next to that, there's a little blue printer icon. So this Q mode will be used if you want to do direct printing of pictures. But most importantly, if I hit the Q mode, notice it lines up with one of the items on the back of the info screen. That means right from the info screen, you can change it just like we did before, except you don't even have to hit the AV. That was what we were on before. We were on that aperture setting, which gives it a boost, exposure compensation, I'm sorry, we should call it. But you can use the four-way controller that we talked about to move your way around to all these different settings. And if you don't know what they are, this camera does a great job of explaining. This is the white balance for natural colors under specific types of lighting. And that is our different picture styles. And I'm not going to go through this whole thing now, continuous shooting mode, because we go through it a little bit later. So we've gone over the menu. Remember to call up the menu. We've gone over the info screen, which calls up our different information. We've gone over our live view, which allows us to see in the back of the screen here. We've gone over our exposure compensation. We've gone over the Q, which allows you on your info screen to move anywhere around using the four-way controller and select one of these things to change at the job. So if you want to change ISO, go into the set button, use your four-way controller. Now, the next thing I'm going to deal with is the four-way controller. As you see, the four-way controller can work your way around all these different areas. But if you don't have the info screen on and say you're shooting and you want to call up something like continuous shooting mode, you can hit the one on the left and the continuous shooting mode items come up. It gets a little confusing because then you could hit it again to rotate left and right through the different ones and hit set. So these buttons around here double. This is for the drive modes. The one above is for white balance. So I can call it my white balance. And then you have your focusing modes with the one at the 3 o'clock position and the one down here, the picture styles. Now to get to these, to change it out, you want to hit the shutter button halfway down in between and you'll be all set to go. So we've covered pretty much all the buttons on the back. We just have a couple more to cover. There's two up here that have some blue markings on them, and they also have white markings on them, so they double as a particular kinds of buttons. So in the shooting mode, if I hit the shutter button halfway down, the first one is the exposure lock. So that's going to hold, by hitting that button, that's going to lock in your exposure over a series of pictures, which is really helpful if you're doing panoramas or something where you don't want the exposure to change that much. And the next one is the automatic selection of the focus points. So you have the different focus points and you can choose the ones that you could select. These other buttons here allow you to zoom in and out of the picture. So if I wanted to call up a particular picture in play mode, which is our next button right here, I just hit the play mode. And there's a particular photo. Now if I wanted, right here we have it in a small mode and it's displaying the photo and some information, but I can zoom in and get a regular picture, or I could zoom in farther. Now zooming in farther is really effective if you're out at a job and you're doing a group shot, say of a wedding party, and you want to make sure it's absolutely in focus. Do a test shot, zoom in and just sort of chat with the people and say, okay, just give me 1 minute more while I just make sure this is in focus. Make sure your item's in focus by zooming into the actual picture and then back. The other thing these zoom in and out buttons do is allow you to scroll among many different pictures. So I can back up, in this case, a couple and get 4 on a screen, or I can get 9 on a screen. And that way you can jump to all the different pictures that way. So there's many different ways to get around. Through a little experimentation, you're going to see that this is one of the best ways to get around. In the back here, you have some dots. This is where your speaker is. So when you go to play things back, it's going to come out of there. We went over the play here. And then we have the garbage can, which will go over deleting stuff. But if we want to delete a particular shot, you just highlight the particular shot, then go to the garbage can, and it gives you the choice between cancel and erase. So really, in just the last 5 minutes here, we've gone over every button on the back. And the only other thing is the drive mode light there, which we talked about. Then when it's a red light's on, you don't want to pull out the card. That's it for the back of the camera. Auto exposure lock allows you to lock in an exposure, and then if you're taking multiple pictures, that exposure will stay the same. Now this is ideal for something like panoramas, where if you're taking a bunch of shots, you don't want the exposure to change too much. Let's take a look at how to use auto exposure lock in your camera. Looking at the side of the camera, we have 3 buttons. Starting with the one on the bottom, this is the depth of field preview indicator. By pressing this and looking through the viewfinder, you could actually see what your depth of field is going to look like on your final image. However, I just prefer to take a test shot and see how that comes out. That's sort of a carryover from the old film days. The next button right here, this is your lens release. Hold it, turn counterclockwise. You can take your lens off, line up the 2 red dots, and turn it back. Right next to this is the flash pop-up feature. So that'll allow your flash in certain combinations to pop up. And then over here, this is your microphone that'll pick up your audio recording if you're not using an external microphone. This little mark on the side of the camera is your focal plane indicator. Now this is where you would take an exact measurement from to get a certain kind of focus or to know how far away something is from the camera. Where do you measure it from a camera? It's not from the front of the lens, it's from this mark right here, because that is actually where the pickup sensor is inside the camera. And then this is your hot shoe right here. And then over here we have our top dial, our display button, which turns the camera display LCD on and off. It could also double as a way to tell you what mode you are at the top of the dial. And then this is your ISO control. When you hit this on the back of the screen, your different ISOs will pop up and you can select them. This is your front control dial, and many of the different things like exposure bracket, auto exposure bracketing are going to be controlled by this front dial once they're called up in the menu in the back. This is, of course, is your shutter speed. This, of course, is your shutter button. Holding it halfway down will focus. Pushing it all the way will take the picture. This little infrared thing here is your remote control sensor. So if you're using a remote control with this camera, you don't want to have this blocked or your remote control won't work. This over here is your red eye reduction pre-flash to make it so you don't have the evil red eyes in your picture. On the side, this cover right here is where your card goes in, and you never want to take the card out when this light is on red. A lot of times when you're shooting movies, that light will stay on red a while after you record it because it's recording it onto the camera and then bringing it into the card. So you could damage some of the data on the card if you were to remove it while that red light was on. On this side of the camera are some of your connections. And let me go over them here. This is your remote control, wired remote control. And this is where your microphone goes in. And then over here, you have your audio visual out cable for RCA, composite video kind of thing. And then if you're plugging right into a television set, you have your HDMI connection. So you go right here, a small HDMI to the larger HDMI, and go right into your large screen TV.